it again so you don't attack strawman. When Jesus is called the Son of God, it means He has the nature of His Father. Just like when it says Jesus is the Son of Man, it means He has the nature of man. No human father birthed Him. He didn't have a man as a father. So Son of Man refers to His humanity, that He's fully human. Son of God refers to Him being God in essence and nature. That's what the title Son of God means in reference to Jesus in the New Testament. So answering Christianity, you have another 4 minutes. I want you to also address Matthew 12:6-8, which you did not address. And please, make sure you quote your references correctly, and don't just misquote, and make sure you deal with what the text actually says, not what you think it says. John 20:28, it says, He said to him, not them. Go ahead.
Okay, now I'm going to quote it because I had text and PMs last time, so I started stuttering. I hope no one PMs me and disturbs the text. Now I can quote it good. In Matthew 16, verses 15 to 20, He saith unto them, But whom ye say that I am? This is Jesus speaking. He saith unto them, But whom ye say that I am? And Simon Peter answered and said, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered and said unto him, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. And then he goes on to verse 20, Then charged he his disciples that they should tell no man that he was Jesus the Christ. Not I'm God or any of that. Now to you think Son of God means He has the nature of God. But there are other people who are called the Son of God. In the Jewish audience which He was speaking to, the Son of God never meant God. The sons of God, people are called the sons of God and so on. It means servant of God, a person from God. It doesn't mean God or has anything godly as you are with God. It doesn't mean you're God or part of Him or any of that. This is your interpretation, not what the Jews thought. The Jews didn't take Son of God meaning God, and neither did His disciples. So here it is. This is the reference, Matthew 16, verses 15 to 20. But even let's read Matthew 16, verses 13 to 14. Let's see what the believing masses thought of Jesus. Matthew 16, verses 13 to 14. When Jesus came into the coasts of Caesarea Philippi, He asked His disciples, saying, Whom do the men say that I, the Son of Man, am? He's asking them, who do the people say I am? And they said, Some say thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. Now note, these people here are definitely believers, because if these weren't believers, they would have said, oh, this man's a blasphemer, something like that. But the response they get is that the people thought he's John the Baptist, he's some other prophet, or he's Elias. Some of them. Not a single one of these masses said he is God. None of them. In fact, when you read the New Testament, the first books, when I say New Testament, I mean Luke, John, Matthew, Mark. When you read those, you see that the people considered him a prophet, a great man from God, but they never considered him to be God. And again, Son of God does not mean God, never did. People who are called the Son of God in the Old Testament, does that mean they're all gods? I don't think so. So anyway, here it is again, Matthew 16, 15 to 20. I don't think I really misquoted it that badly. I said, His disciples called Him the Son of the living God, and Jesus said, I am the Christ. And again, the masses didn't believe He was God. So that's what I want you to address. Why don't the believing masses believe that Jesus is God? For the sake of argument, let's say Thomas was referring to Jesus. Let's say he was referring to Jesus. So what? You have one disciple who thinks he's God, you have another disciple who doesn't think he's God, and you have the masses of believers who don't believe Jesus is God. And if you ask me, I prefer to go with what the true believing Jews thought about Jesus, which is He was a prophet and a great man, and the Son of God, the Messiah, the Christ, rather than the opinion of one man named Thomas. And anyway, I don't believe Thomas was referring to Jesus, my Lord, my God, my Lord referring to Jesus, my God referring to the Father. And just because Jesus didn't correct him, does that mean Jesus is accepting it? Just because Jesus didn't correct him, does it mean He's accepting it? Jesus was probably fed up with them because of their unbelief, and they never understood anything He said, so He probably had enough of them that at least they just believed in Jesus. That was good enough, because if you believe in Jesus, you believe in the one that sent Him, and that is the message of Jesus. If and the microphone is yours.
When you can't refute an argument, you just decide to distort and attack strawman. He just said just because Jesus didn't correct him, that doesn't mean that Jesus was affirming. Answer Christianity, it'd be good if you actually listen to what I said and what the text said. It says, Jesus said to Thomas, Thomas, now you have believed. Blessed are those who do not see and believe. So it's not just he didn't correct him, he blessed his profession of faith, his statement of faith. So Christ acknowledged Thomas's praise of him as his Lord and God. So deal with the text, don't distort the text. Now, what was the most shocking thing about your so-called rebuttal? You referred to what the crowd said about Jesus, and you said, I'd rather take what the crowd said about Jesus, that he's a prophet. In point of fact, what you quoted in Matthew 16:14 didn't have the crowd saying that Jesus was just the prophet. They said that he was John the Baptist, or one of the prophets come back from the dead. So if you're saying they're correct, you're admitting that Jesus is one of the Old Testament prophets, or John himself that came back from the dead. Is that what you're saying? I mean, it's on tape. You said it in front of everyone, right? I had to chuckle on that one. Yeah, see, I would rather go with the crowds, because the crowd said that, he's a prophet. Actually, the crowds didn't just say he's a prophet. Matthew 16:14, which you referred to, actually had the crowd saying, you're either John the Baptist, Elijah, Jeremiah, one of those prophets come back from the dead. Which you said you agreed with. So you're now going to have to tell us who Jesus is exactly. Is he John the Baptist? Yahya? Is he Jeremiah? Which Old Testament prophet is he? Because you just said to the room, I'd rather agree with the crowds that he's a prophet, and yet you cited Matthew 16:14. This is why you're not qualified to debate and represent Islam or critique Christianity. But then you said to the Jews, the title Son of God never meant God, right? Well, again, let me refute that lie, and let me correct another distortion. I said when the title Son of God is used in reference to Jesus, it implies his deity. I didn't say Son of God by itself. The title Son of God, when used by Jesus and for Jesus, refers to his deity. Here is the proof. Sarah posed John 5:16-18. Why did the Jews want to kill him? But obviously, he's going to come back and say, oh, see, the Jews are just trying to find any excuse to condemn Jesus. Okay? I mean, what are you going to do? No matter what you present, it's not going to be good enough, but that's fine. I'm not here to convince him. Convince those whom God is touching. And this was why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, my Father's working until now, and I am working. Now what does it say in verse 18? Verse 18. This was why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. So the Jews who heard Jesus use the title Son of God and referred to God as his Father knew he was claiming to be Son of God in the sense that he was equal to the Father. This is what I was saying earlier. He didn't come out and say he's God because he had to affirm that he's personally distinct from the Father. But he speaks in a way that even the audience knew he was claiming to be equal to the Father in essence. In fact, this goes back to the first point I asked you. Jesus says that he can work on the Sabbath because the Father can work on the Sabbath. Now we know why the Father can work on the Sabbath. He is the Lord of the Sabbath. He's above the Sabbath. He's not bound to the Sabbath. Jesus says, because I'm his Son, I too am over the Sabbath, the Lord of the Sabbath, and I can work on the Sabbath. That's why I quoted Matthew 12:8. Jesus says he's the Lord of the Sabbath. Now we want you to address some of the points I'm raising instead of evading it. Explain to us, how can a prophet claim to be the very Lord of the Sabbath and claim to have the same right as God himself to override the Sabbath laws and work on the Sabbath, which no creature, no Jew could do, only God could do? So you're wrong. You need to study the scriptures more carefully because it's backfiring against you. So address, how could Jesus say he's the Lord of the Sabbath when only God is Lord of the Sabbath? How can he claim to have the right to work on the Sabbath, which only God had that right? And explain to me why the Jews thought he was claiming to be equal to God by claiming to be God's Son and that God was his Father. Hopefully you'll do better next time.
Hopefully you'll stop misquoting me and making lies against me. The reason I quoted the masses was to show you that the masses didn't believe he was God. Maybe you should pay attention and listen. The reason I quote them is to show you that they don't believe he's God. So I'm with them on that none of them believe he's God. That's the point. And the fact is, although they don't know who he is, they are believers in the sense because they don't believe he's a blasphemer. They didn't call him a liar, and they didn't call him these evil names that the Jews did. So maybe you should pay attention rather than coming on the mic and trying to score cheap points on me and misquote me. I think it was clear that I was quoting them to show the people that the believing masses didn't believe he's God. So if you were alive back then, you would have been one of those wrong people in the heretic sect who believe he's God, because most people didn't believe. Now anyway, you say that Jesus called the Father my Father, so that means he's God. Oh, just because he said my Father. But wait, when Jesus taught his people how to pray, what did he say? When Jesus taught his people how to pray in Matthew 6:9, after this manner, therefore pray ye, our Father which are in heaven. Jesus is telling the people that he's even your Father. So if you're sitting alone at home, you yourself can address God as your Father. You can say, my Father in heaven. So does that mean now you're God, just because you call the Father my Father? Because you come on the mic and you say, oh, the Jews understood what Jesus meant when he said, my Father. And so what? If you're talking from your own side, from your personal point of view, of course you're going to say, my Father. When a Jew goes out and prays, the ones who believe in Jesus, when they pray, they're going to say, my Father which is in heaven. Does that mean that Jew is with God? I don't think so. Secondly, you say Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath again. The answer is simple. This is a title. To me, this is a title of honor. Lord doesn't mean God. And anyway, the only reason why he could have been called the Lord of the Sabbath and so on, was because God gave him all authority. He gave him the authority. He gave him the authority to do what he wants and so on. That's what the Bible says. Let me quote it for you, that God gave Jesus everything. John 13:3. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he was come from God, and he went to God. So the only reason why Jesus is called Lord of the Sabbath, it's a title of honor. The Father had given him the authority, so therefore he has the right to work on the Sabbath day. Secondly, the reason why Jesus does what the Father does, the reason why Jesus does what only the Father does, is because, again, everything Jesus said and has is from the Father. Jesus said, I don't do the will of myself, but the will of the Father. So everything Jesus does is what the Father does, because he's doing the will of the Father. How can Jesus be doing something on his own when the Father gave him everything? If someone gives me everything I have, such as miracles, doctrine, of course I'm going to say I only do what that person does, because he gave me everything. Jesus never had anything on his own. Jesus never performed a miracle on his own. Jesus never taught a doctrine from his own. The words he spoke were from God the Father. So anyway, you're not making good points. Every point you're bringing up is being refuted. The Christians probably won't agree, but the objective person will definitely agree. You say my Father means Jesus is God because he says my Father. So if I go now and pray and say my Father, does it mean I'm God? Lord of the Sabbath is a title of honor. Jesus was given all authority. John 13:3. Jesus was given all doctrine and so on. And I'm going to quote all those verses when I come up on the next 4 minutes. I'm going to show Jesus being given everything, and I'm going to show Jesus being given all his doctrine the next time I come on the mic. So anyway.
Okay, it's getting tiring to refute your distortion. First of all, I quoted John 5:16-18 to answer your question. Let me refresh your memory. You said that the Jews never took the title Son of God to mean one who's God in nature. That's why I quoted John 5:16-18, to show you that the Jews, who you appeal to, understood that when Jesus said God was his Father and that he's the Son of God, he was claiming to be equal to God, God in essence. That's why I brought it up. That's the first point. So again, please address the points that I'm raising in answer to your objections, and stop going on a tangent and attacking straw man. Secondly, I keep saying this, and I need to repeat it again. When Jesus claims to be the Son of God, he claims it in a sense in which it shows that he's equal to the Father. I didn't say calling God your Father makes someone God. I didn't even say that if you say you're the Son of God, that makes you God. Now this is about the 5th time I've repeated this. I said that when Jesus calls himself the Son of God, or when he's called the Son of God by the New Testament writers, when he's called the Son of God, it means in reference to him, not to anyone or everyone, that he is God in essence, co-equal to the Father. John 5:16-18 proved it. How did it prove it? Because what Jesus said is not just that God is my Father, but because he's my Father and I am his Son, I can do what the Father does, even work on the Sabbath, which you cannot do, being an ordinary man, an ordinary Jew. This is why